I'm not sure it's fair to say that James Bond ever became uncool, but it did kind of fade into distant memory. Once upon a time, movies like Goldfinger and Dr. No were action movie gold, but decades passed and James Bond simply became a source of one-liners. Villains were imitated, but modern audiences were no longer familiar with the original source. Then, 2006 arrived and Casino Royale graced the big screen, and just like that, James Bond was back. It was with this scene that James Bond was all at once brought back to life. Kicking off the movie, we saw a modern, fresh James Bond engage in an 8-minute action sequence, running up cranes, jumping across buildings, impressive parkour-style moves. I remember being dragged to the theater to see Casino Royale. I was guilty of thinking the new James Bond movie would simply be a boring, cliched, 70s-style spy movie. Man, was I ever wrong. So what made this movie so good? Well, what else were we working with in 2006? Some titles included The Da Vinci Code, An Inconvenient Truth, 2 separate movies about magicians, and 3 football movies. There were other movies, obviously, but none so noteworthy that we're reminiscing about them nearly 20 years later. And let's not forget the movies that started it all. The story was solid, but it could be argued that the original James Bond movies didn't always hit upon 007's full potential. Casino Royale was the perfect reimagining of James Bond. Daniel Craig's James Bond was a wonderful blend of a suave, debonair man who, at the same time, was pulling off the image of a well-trained secret agent that could whoop anyone. Roger Moore could be refined, but I don't know if anyone really believed they were in physical danger around him. Casino Royale delivered exciting and varied action scenes throughout the whole movie, from fighting in stairwells and bathrooms to fistfights in a rogue tanker. This was an action movie extraordinaire, yet it still managed to inject just as much tension into quiet scenes around a poker table. In 2006, the idea of a reboot wasn't unheard of, but it was still new and not yet beaten to death. James Bond was an ideal franchise to reboot if there ever was one. The basic premise of James Bond is pretty timeless. Highly trained agents seeking out outrageous villains in highly dangerous situations. This isn't a trope that's at risk of going out of style. The Bond movies were standalone films that didn't require any familiarity with previous movies, making it possible to churn out movies as quick as you could think of one, assuming there are people talented enough to write them. Now, whether or not they hit the mark with later 007 movies is up for debate, but what is certain is that they struck gold with Casino Royale. So let's pretend we live in a world where reboots haven't been overdone and you could have the best writers and directors bring your favorite franchise back to life. What would you choose? Let me know in the comments. I would also like to say thank you again to everyone who has subscribed. This is a brand new channel and each subscriber is noticed with great excitement and appreciation, and I will see you on the next one.